एक मिनट रुक जाओ, रेडी होने दो. चलो ये कर लेते हैं. This could be a great intro.
Hi, I'm Akshay.
Hi, this is Saurabh, and you are listening to the Founder Thesis podcast. We meet some of the most celebrated startup founders in the country.
And we want to learn how to build a unicorn.
Hi, I am Ranjeet. I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO at Pratilipi. Pratilipi is one of India's largest storytelling platforms across different formats and languages.
We all love listening to stories. I think it's something that's genetically encoded in us. And Ranjeet, the founder of Pratilipi, was no different. He grew up in semi-urban, rural parts of UP, spending a lot of time either playing cricket or reading fiction. And as he went off to pursue higher education, he realized that there is a dearth of options for people who like to read stories in their vernacular language. And this was the germ of an idea which today is Pratilipi, which has raised almost $80 million of funding till date and is the largest platform for vernacular content in India. Here's Ranjeet talking about that process of moving from a secure, stable job in Vodafone, where he was doing sales, to becoming a founder.
So, Ranjeet, tell me about your origin story.
So I was born in a very small village in Raebareli district of Uttar Pradesh. So it's like a less than 1,000 population village. My father was in army. My mom is a homemaker. We used to live in a joint family. So most people were farmers, but some people would do odd jobs. And then there have been a bunch of people in the family and extended family who have worked in armed forces in different roles.
Gotcha. So you used to stay in like the cantonment areas? Yeah,
So sometimes. So I spent a bunch of time with my father till class 7th, beginning of class 7th. So at that time, I would just stay in the cantonment areas. But my father's last posting was in a border area. So in that case, families are not allowed. So at that time, I was studying in Raebareli city, living in a rented one room with my mom. And when father retired, I was again in Raebareli.
And your education was like Hindi medium, UP board? Yeah, was it English medium? Yeah.
Mostly, funnily enough, there's something called Hindi/English medium. So some subjects are in English, some are in Hindi. Mostly in Kendriya Vidyalayas, mostly in Raebareli, a little bit in Lucknow, a little bit in Jaipur.
Okay. And what outside of school, what did you like to do as a kid?
So mostly, I only had two hobbies. One was playing cricket, and second was basically reading. So I would usually have a deal with the shopkeepers of bookstores nearby my place within like a kilometer or two, where I'll go to their shop and I'll kind of take care of their shop for a few hours, and in return, I'll get to read whatever I want for free. So that and cricket were my two favorite hobbies.
Achha. So how come you got hooked onto reading? Matlab, generally, reading doesn't come naturally to kids.
So I think my uncle, like my father's elder brother, is a writer, and he used to read quite a bit. And then my mom reads a lot of pulp fiction, mostly like novels like Keshav Pandit and Ved Prakash Sharma, things that you typically find on railway stations and bus stops. So I think looking at them maybe might have been one of the influences. Another one might have been that because I did not have big hobbies, so I think reading just became like a escape mechanism of how do you kind of cope up with that.
And these were like Hindi novels mostly. Yeah.
Starting, these were comicses. Starting like Champak, Nanda Mama, Balhans. Then proper comicses like Nagraj, Subhat Mondo Dhruv, Doga. Then literature, and then I sometimes novels and all. Novels and all, I think I only started after class 8th or 9th, mainly because I was not really allowed to read novels.
Okay. But like, what language were these in?
Almost all of that would be Hindi.
Okay.
Like maybe
Okay.
2% English, 98% Hindi, maybe less than 2%
Huh.
English.
Okay. So, what was your ambition when you were in school? Like, what did you think? आगे जाके क्या करना है?
Actually, it will keep on changing. So there was a long period of time where army was the first choice. Um, so I applied for NDA 5 times. I cleared the written exam all 5 times. Went for interviews, actually SSB interviews 4 times, got rejected all 4 times. In parallel, there have been times where I've thought of becoming a professional cricketer, a cricket commentator, a lawyer, a politician, a farmer, a bunch of different things.
Okay. So then what did you finally end up doing after school? So after school, did you like drop for NDA and all? Like, did you drop a few years? Or?
I did not drop for NDA, but I did take a drop mainly because, well, I was so I was so both confident and like, what is the right word? I so much wanted to join army at the time, and at some point in time, it became an ego issue that I'm so smart and I'm so fit, and how can I not be selected? That I did not apply for any of the engineering entrance examinations. So after class 12th, when finally I said, okay, this thing is not working out, so I took a drop year so that I could appear for engineering entrance examinations, and then I went and did my engineering.
Okay. And this was in Bhubaneswar. So how was that experience, like being away from UP and completely different state?
So it was actually pretty good. So in like the drop year that I took, so in general, my mom was very protective of me, primarily because my elder brother was and elder sister were spoiled by my grandparents, and in general, like I was the one kid that they would call like studious, smart, whatever you want to call it, ghar ka naam roshan karega types. So like for example, I was not allowed to fly kites. I was not allowed to ride a bicycle, just in case any of these things end up injuring me. So I think that 1 year that I took as a drop, I was in Kanpur, and that 1 year I think got into a lot of fights, did a lot of the stuff that teenagers typically tend to do. I wanted to basically not stay close to like Raebareli, Kanpur, Lucknow. So I thought that if I do, then the company will remain roughly similar, which would mean that I will end up doing the same things again, even if I don't want to. It's just that you kind of get sucked into it. So that was the main reason of why I decided to go as far away from UP as possible. And Bhubaneswar slash KIT happened to be that. So I think it was good also because like I was starting from a clean slate, new friends, new work. So I like that.
Okay. And did you like opt for placements after KIT, or like
I
what? Hmm.
I already had a couple of offers even before placements, but I did certain placements as well. But I also pretty clear that so at that time, like most kids, I was very extra confident slash arrogant. So at that time, the plan was that I'll get into either IIM Ahmedabad or FMS Delhi, and I'll go and do an MBA. And if I don't, for some reason, I don't get into these two, then I'll go into a job. And as I said, like I already had, I think, three maybe off-campus offers, and then I
How did
think
you
it was
get these
Infosys.
off-campus offers? Like you were applying on job portals or something?
I wasn't actually, funnily enough. So I was, as in at that time in third year. So my engineering college was a tier two, tier three engineering college, and generally from tier two, tier three engineering colleges, a lot of times people start preparing for MBA entrance examinations. And at that time, I was very, very popular in the test taking janta as someone who is very smart and who is going to like 100% or at least 99% of times you are going to get a 100 percentile, not just that you are going to like clear CAT exams, more like you are going to be 100 percentile. That's it. So I think the job offers that I got were more from reputation, less from actual work or anything else. So I think two out of the three were, for example, B school prep type companies. One was a startup type where the premise was basically we want raw smartness and then you can figure out what to do, how to do it.
Got it. Okay. Okay. So why FMS? Like IIM Ahmedabad, of course, I understand, but
Actually, neither of these were rational reasons. Both of these were emotional reasons. I'm Ahmedabad because, like, as in at least at that time, it was well known as a term called WIMV, so well known Institute of Management in Western India. So like it was just what I started to know when I thought of MBA. Like that's how I heard about MBA for the first time. FMS because the way FMS works is a lot closer to the way I think world should work. I don't like relative grading, for example. I don't like rat races in general, where everybody has a single goal and they are moving in a single direction, doing all the same things and all of that. And then I don't think higher education should be something that should be very expensive. So I think FMS just aligned with how I think the world should be. And
how is FMS different from other B schools? Like
among the top tier B schools, FMS is the only one that doesn't have relative grading. As in, at least it didn't when I was there. I don't know if that's true anymore. FMS didn't really have the rat race in the sense like a lot of people would actually spend, let's say, 7, 8 hours a day pursuing whatever they wanted. Like you did not need to study for like 15 hours to get a good placement. And then the fees at my time was 35, 40,000 for 2 years combined. So I actually ended up making 5 lakh rupees studying at FMS in 2 years as against spending whatever 15, 16 lakhs while doing an
uh,
MBA. So
how did you make 5 lakhs rupees? Like internship stipend or something?
internship is one part. I made about 1.5 lakh in internship. But also I would participate in a lot of different events and competitions. And again, because like you have so much time at FMS compared to like again top tier B schools, which meant that I could just go and participate in like 15, 20 different B plan competitions, consulting competitions, whatever.
Okay. So in a way, your roots for entrepreneurship were kind of set in FMS.
I think before that, but FMS definitely would have helped. Uh, I think when I was a kid, like I don't care about money, but also I don't want to be in a situation where I have to care about money. Like I don't want to have to worry about when I was a kid, for example. I did not want to have to worry about that. Okay, I want to eat pani ke batashe, so now I need to figure out a way to get 2 rupees, and which is what would happen. So I would do random odd things to make sure that I have 2 rupees. So, for example, in summers, let's say, like when the actual harvesting happens, people will take all the major grain particles, but there will be some grain particles which are just thrown over the field because, well, there was air and so on and so forth. So I'll go and I'll pick that up, I'll get it cleaned, I'll sell it on a shop, and I'll make like 15 rupees.
Okay.
And that
Okay.
15 rupees would make sure that I can do random stuff. And again, I'd never had like expensive hobbies. It was more like I did not want to have to worry about money.
Right. Got it. Okay. Okay. So from FMS, then where did you get placed?
I got placed into Vodafone. So I joined there as an I think I did my internship with City, and then I joined Vodafone as a final placement.
So why Vodafone? Why not like, I mean, like the most coveted jobs are like investment banking, consulting, and
Yes,
these kind of.
mostly because I never, as in my purpose of MBA was never to find a job. My purpose was MBA was basically spend 2 years with smart people, having fun and like just doing random talks and figuring out random stuff. So when I went into FMS, I think I was ranked two in the entrance exam. When I got out, I think I was probably in bottom 30, maybe bottom 25. So Vodafone was probably one of the companies that gave me an offer.
Okay. 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 So that Vodafone में क्या क्या? Like what was the role there?
So normally in most companies after again tier 1 B schools, you are typically hired as a management trainee, which means that you go through different stints in different verticals. So I did a stint in channel sales, I did a stint in marketing, I did a stint in retail, and then I got a full time role as a channels as an like telecom prepaid sales, which is called
Yeah.
channel sales in telecom
Yeah. Which is like hardcore on the field kind of a
on
role.
the field sales. Yeah.
And did you enjoy that kind of role?
So I enjoyed the role. I enjoyed my work. The problem was that telecom is, in general, like a very very hated field. When I say telecom, I mean like prepaid sales in telecom. In fact, I don't know if that's true anymore, but at least at the time there were a bunch of surveys where it was like insurance sales is the most hated job, and then prepaid sales is the second most hated job. So there's a lot of unethical, illegal things that go along to make up for the numbers. There is a lot of like shouting and abusing at your team and all of that. So I did not really like how it worked, but I enjoyed the job itself. Also because I'm a very ambitious, aggressive person, and in sales it's easy to prove why you are better than everybody else. Like when I joined, I think my territory was either the worst or the second worst for 15 years. When I left, we were ranked one for 3 out of the 4 months and ranked two in the other four. And that gives a different kind of five for the sales guy.
Which territory did you get?
I was handling Ahmedabad.
Okay. Okay.
If you like to hear stories of founders, then we have tons of great stories from entrepreneurs who have built billion-dollar businesses. Just search for the Founder Thesis podcast on any audio streaming app like Spotify, Ghana, Apple Podcasts, and subscribe to the show.
So what made you quit Vodafone? Like you quit in less than 2 years. Like,
Yeah.
what drove that?
So the tipping point was that like my superiors slash my reporting manager and his reporting manager, they uh, switched somebody from my team to go to a different location, and he did not want to because of a personal family issue. So that was the tipping point. But in general, I was just not happy with how it was working. And I wanted to work with people. It was very slow. Generally, corporates are typically slow. They are very risk averse. They don't think about 10 years out. They think too much about like, okay, what happens like next week and next month and so on and so forth. And that's fine. Again, I liked sales because well, I like acting on things. It's just that I think acting on things has to be towards something. As one example, like I was the ASM when M-Pesa was launched in Ahmedabad, and I thought it was fantastic product. If they thought of it as an internet product, I don't think there was any room for something like a Paytm to basically come up and become this big. They were selling it as a telecom product, which is also fine, uh, but they were just not even open to listening. Okay, why this is not the right approach? So, as random example, they would spend like, if I remember correctly, I think I had like a budget of 2 crores a month to promote M-Pesa, but users still have to pay money to both put money into M-Pesa and take money out. Like you are trying to kill cash. There is no money for taking out cash from my pocket or putting cash back in my pocket. And you are any which case spending more money than that on marketing. If you want to make it work, it has to be seamless like cash, where you cannot charge money just to put money, to load money into M-Pesa account or to take money out from M-Pesa account. You were like, no, that's how you make money. You have to be profitable.
Hmm. Yeah, I remember one time M-Pesa was pretty much mandatory if you were getting a SIM from Vodafone. Like,
Oh, that would happen
mandatory
after.
in the sense that they would push,
That is true. That is because there was so much margin for both the salespeople and the retailer that they would try
uh,
and push that.
okay. So then, like, did you quit with some idea in mind? Ke, I will look for another job. I will do my own. Yeah. Kya tha
Actually,
wo?
at the time, nobody really believed when I was saying like I have no freaking clue. I'll figure out. But like my plan A was basically, and coincidentally, when I was in engineering college, I was clear that I'm going to start a company. When I was in B school, I was clear that I'm going to start a company someday. When I quit my job at that time, I did not want to start a company. The plan was to try and find a early stage startup, like let's say pre-series C, pre-series D, and then basically like beg them for a job. The premise was that I had worked already in strategy, in retail, in sales, in marketing, and I was an engineer by like training before that. So I, like, okay, I can do a little bit of whatever. So I took 4 months break just to meet a lot of people, including friends and any founder who'd take a meeting. And the plan A was to find somebody that I really liked and then just beg them for a job. I liked some people, but did not like anybody enough to say, give me a job. And that's how Pratilipi kind of came.
So then what happened? Like you could not find any compelling job, but like were you also exploring business ideas and talking to potential
I
co-founders? Yeah.
not talking to potential co-founders, as in they could have been potential co-founders because these were again either friends or founders themselves, but not as in that was not the explicit reason. The explicit reason was to spend time with friends to brainstorm and to meet founders to see if I like someone. So my last stop was in Bangalore. I spent some time in Delhi, sometime Gurgaon, sometime Pune, sometime Mumbai. Last stop was in Bangalore because probabilistically it seemed like Bangalore is the highest probability of where I would find a job because well most of the tech startups were here. So I would teach at times in the daytime to make sure I have some money. Afternoons typically I'll go and meet founders, and evenings I'll typically have a drink or two and chat with friends on what makes sense, what can theoretically be possible, including my own ideas, but also like other ideas which other companies are working on.
And how long did you do this? This
I
whole
think about a month.
okay. Hmm.
And I think I was particularly biased towards two ideas at the time. One was Pratilipi, one was something like Dunzo, but with a very different GTM plan. And Pratilipi's idea had remained in my head for like when I was in first year of engineering college. But I did not want to pursue it because I did not think that I am a good fit for that idea. But like this seemed like the best idea that I could think of at the time. And this was a problem that was close to my heart, any which case, like from an emotional perspective, not from a rational perspective. So I thought, okay, let's give it a shot.
Hmm. Hmm. What was that problem? Like, tell me about that. Like, what in first year of engineering, what did you identify as a
When I
problem?
went to my engineering college, I realized that Hindi content was simply not available that much. And if you remember, I have always been a voracious reader. So when I went to engineering college, I realized that like offline in Bhubaneswar, especially a bookstore can carry maybe 200, 300 Hindi titles, like 3,000 total titles. And if you read as much as I did, you had read most of the good ones. Online, there wasn't really anything back in 2006. For English, there were still a few, but for Hindi, there was literally nothing. So I had to shift to reading English entirely. But also, like, I don't like being told what you cannot do, like in general as a person. And this was like literally the world saying that, okay, you have to shift to English or you have to stop reading. There is no other choice. So I
Were
basically,
there options on Kindle and all, like ebooks?
I don't, even if there was, as in, I don't even know if Kindle was there back then. Even if there was no way in hell that I had the money to buy a Kindle.
Right, right. Okay. Hmm.
So I wanted somebody to solve this problem from that time, like because I did not think that the world should be like this. I wanted, as in, I think the world should be more like uh, people get to choose. As in, even if it's a wrong choice, it's your choice, and you get to decide whether you should do this or that or something else. Being told that you cannot read in Hindi and you only have to read in English or French or whatever, that doesn't sound like the kind of world that I want to live in. I wanted somebody to solve this. It's just that nobody had. Uh, so yeah, so I thought, okay, nobody's actually solving this. I am not finding a company that I really like, so why don't I kind of try this out?
So how did you decide to solve it? Like, did you decide to do like distribution of Hindi books offline, or create an alternative to Kindle which has Hindi books on it, or what? Like,
So I generally can take a lot of pain and uncertainty in short term, but in general, I think more from a long term perspective. I was very clear that if I was going to build a business, I did not mind failing. But if it was to fail, I wanted to fail in the first 1, 2, 3 years, not like after 10 years after I have already become very large and then like the business goes away. Poof. I wanted to make sure that the model that I'm going to pursue has some kind of strong network effects or economies of scale, which basically makes it difference for somebody else to come and compete. So, which is why it's very clear that I wanted to build a UGC platform, which is basically like a true marketplace. Think of it like WhatsApp, YouTube, basically. So that once you get to critical mass, and UGC platforms are impossibly hard to build in general, but once you get to enough critical mass, then because you have more readers, so more writers come to you. Because you have more writers, so more readers come to you. So business kind of is very, very hard to compete against. So
that
that is the model.
flywheel.
Exactly.
Okay.
I would never have built something like Kindle, even as in that's there is a 0% chance, because then it is basically about like who has more money to pay off more publishers. And today, at that point, I might have had more money, but someday Bezos will always have more money than me as soon as he
Hmm.
decided to come.
Right, right. So, I believe there's this startup called Waterpad.
Wattpad.
You've heard Wattpad,
Yeah,
which
Alan is one of my favorite founders. Alan is the
okay.
CEO of Wattpad.
So that was like the inspiration to do a Wattpad, but for
Uh,
vernacular.
Biggest inspiration was YouTube, but Wattpad was also one of the big inspirations. So there have been like bunch of inspirations along the way. So I really liked Quora, what they were doing back then, at least. Been a big fan of Adam, Quora CEO. YouTube was like literal directly like the best, let's say, inspiration slash what we wanted to kind of move towards.
But did you want
Wattpad
to
was
do
another.
video, or did you want to
It's
do
not
text?
about video per se. It's about like how the company operates. It's not about text or video or whatever. It's more like YouTube has truly democratized uh, one form of content creation. So we wanted to
Right,
do that for
right.
well a lot of other
Okay,
forms.
okay. So what did you launch then? Like, what was your go-to market, and what did the first product look like?
So in the beginning, we just started with online literature text, basically. So that was essentially, in fact, the first product that we launched, or the first version of the product that we launched, was simply like a blog. So you can come and you can read stories. That is it. There's nothing else that you can do. Primarily because we were very, very clear that this is a problem that we want to solve, but we had no clue, or at least we did not want to kind of act like we are experts and we know everything, that what the solution is going to look like. So we said, okay, we'll figure out solution along the way. So we had a hypothesis. I had made a chart paper of like, if this works, then this will happen. If this works, then this will happen. But the premise was we'll let the market teach us as we kind of go along. So the first version was basically simply a blog types where people can come and read stories and poetry and novels and stuff like that, so that we can see if there are people who are at least interested in reading something. If they are, then
Hmm,
we'll go to the
hmm.
next step. So that was the first product. Then
And
we got some.
before we go to next, so who is we here? Like, did
So
you?
at that time, I think as in when we started, I got four of my friends as co-founders, and then
Hmm.
over a period of time, of course, more and more people kind of kept on joining.
And these were what, like from FMS or from college days, or
Uh,
what?
so one was my school batchmate, one was my engineering college batchmate, one was my batchmate from MBA, one was my colleague from Vodafone.
Okay, good mix of co-founders. Okay, so that's like a. I mean, five co-founders sounds little unwieldy, no? And especially in the early days, was there enough work for five co-founders?
So honestly, I think the number one quality that a founder needs is being resourceful. So at that point in time, there's no way that I could have paid like market salary to smart people. So if I wanted to work with smart people, then the only way to make that work was to give out significantly more equity and get people as co-founders. So that was the thing that we needed to get to that point. I don't think it's particularly about whether one co-founder is better or eight co-founders are better. I think it's more about like what makes sense in that particular context.
Okay. ठीक है. So 5 of you launched a blog, and how did you generate content for it? Like the
Uh,
stories and the
so
poems?
before actually launching, to figure out if there's a real problem, like it's a problem for me, that's great. That doesn't mean there is a business. What I did was I spoke to about 350, 400 odd authors and 350 around readers to try and understand the problem itself. So the first thing that we did when we decided to launch was to go out to these 350, 400 odd people and try to convince them to basically put their content on Pratilipi. Most of them said no, because their point was like, if there are no readers, why would I take the effort to basically make an account and upload and all of that? So then we said, okay, you don't have to do anything. We will make your account. We will upload your content. If anything happens, we'll tell you. If somebody reads your story, we'll tell you. If somebody reviews your story, we'll tell you. All you have to do is basically give us a yes, like give us approval to do. So that is how we got the first, maybe about 200 odd stories. Then we got about another 150 odd stories from public domain content, which is basically content which was written by a writer a long time back, and now they have passed away, and that story or that content has become public domain content. So we got about 150 odd those stories to put onto the platform. So I think this is how we seeded the supply side in the beginning days.
And how did you do the demand generation? Like, how did you get the readers?
Readers were mostly utilizing our own network. So we'll put posts on Facebook, Twitter, email, WhatsApp that like we are launching this. Or generally, a lot of times we'll not even do this. We'll do more like, okay, just read this story on Pratilipi. It's an awesome story. You should definitely read. Because we had a lot of public domain content, so there were a lot of stories which were like old but very famous, like Godan or Gaban. So we'll put a post like, just reread Godan, and like it's one of the best stories ever written. So that is how we got the early part of readers. And then another thing which really helped was that for writers, once they saw that 5 people have read my story, then they shared with their friends that what, my story is published on Pratilipi and you can go and read that.
Okay.
That helped generate a lot of early readership as well.
Okay. So then tell me next version of product then after this.
So I think so. It was not like there was a big bang version. After that, we kept on launching newer features. So, for example, we started by launching, okay, as a reader, you can rate or review a story. Then we launched that, okay, you can follow your favorite writers so that if they publish a new story, you'll get a notification. Then we launched library so that you can add stuff to your library if you don't have time and you want to read it later. Then we launched the self-publishing part where writers don't have to kind of send like the content to us and then we upload it, because we got to a scale where manually uploading content was becoming just impossibly hard. So we launched a part of the platform where writers could come and directly upload their content on their own.
Which would be like a Medium or a Quora,
like a Medium or a Quora or a Wattpad. Yeah. So over a period of time, the product kind of keeps on evolving.
Tell me the journey, like
honest answer is I wouldn't remember. Like there are, as in we typically launch or we typically, let's say, deploy maybe 15 days a month. Like there's no way that I remember 15 deployments a month for last.
No, but I mean broad stroke evolution. Like from text you also moved on. So from that broad evolution of Pratilipi.
Right.
And also, if you can tell me like how the user growth also happened along with these milestones.
Again, honest answer is I wouldn't remember.
Okay.
But roughly, I think so. We have always focused on long term and kind of trying to do the right thing. We haven't really focused primarily on growth. The premise was always that growth is a happy byproduct of trying to do the right thing. So, in fact, apart from me, like nobody else in the team till about 6 months back, till a year back for sure, like nobody really ever had targets or goals or KPIs or whatever. It was more like, okay, focus on whatever you think is the right thing to do, and growth will happen as a byproduct. And even today, I think maybe 5 people in the team think about or like have goals or targets in their mind. Most people still focus on doing the right thing, and then growth happens as a byproduct. So I wouldn't really remember exact milestones. In terms of new product launches, for the first 4.5, 5 years, I think we only focused on winning the online literature piece. So in general, as an early stage startup, you don't really have that many resources, both in terms of people, in terms of bandwidth, in terms of money, in terms of anything else. So I wanted to focus on this use case and try to get it to a size where it actually makes sense as a business. So that's all that we did. Then I think towards the beginning of last year is when we felt confident that within online literature, now we have a sizable lead over everybody else in the market. And that is when we decided, okay, now it's time to basically launch newer formats. And if you remember, like earlier, I was saying that Pratilipi is a storytelling platform. It was never about literature or online literature or whatever. It was basically, if you want to share a story with the rest of the world, you should be able to do that, irrespective of any language, irrespective of any format, irrespective of any geography. So we started with the Pratilipi FM, which is an audiobook product, audio
Okay.
shows, podcasts.
Okay.
Then we launched Pratilipi Comics, which is an online comics product. Then we acquired a company called IVM Podcast, which has been a podcasting studio. Then we acquired a small publisher called Right Order, which hopefully will become our physical book publishing, physical comics publishing arm. And we also started licensing our stories to ecosystem partners for conversion into other formats like a web series or a movie, and that has like started happening as well.
Okay. Okay. So, like till 2020, when it was largely focused on text-based content, like, was your focus more on acquiring authors or on acquiring readers? Like, how did you balance the pressures? And what were like the growth hacks that you used to build that?
So primary focus was actually not on acquisition at all. Primary focus was on what can I do to make my authors the happiest. And at least one of the key things of making your authors happiest is to give them more readers. In fact, probably that is the number one thing. So the only reason why we even focused a little bit on demand side was because, well, that was needed to make my writers feel happy. But from both product perspective and from company perspective, the single biggest focus area was how do I keep my like top writers as happy as possible. That is what we largely focused on, and we have always done a lot of experiments on product engineering and everything else that you think of. It's not like growth hacks per se, but it's more like just experimenting and seeing what works, what doesn't. So till I think about 2 years, 2.5 years back, we had a grand total of 0 people who worked in marketing or sales or anything of that sort.
Okay.
Literally. So it was
But
basically
how were the readers coming in then?
that is the thing. Like all the product people, all the engineers, even people from finance or customer service, everybody was encouraged to experiment. And like some experiments would work, a lot of them will not work. And whatever work, we'll try and basically double down and scale that. But there was no marketing, growth, sales, business development, whatever you can think of.
As in, your thesis basically was that in a UGC platform, the people generating content are the kings. Like they should be the ones that are your primary market to cater to.
That was part of it, but the bigger part was that if I have enough high quality content and if the product really works, then I can always spend money and acquire customers whenever I want. And any which case, we are growing at 4x year on year, and 4x year on year growth is pretty okay. So it reminds me like we are any which case growing well enough, and if I want to accelerate, we can whenever we want by just spending more money.
And what was driving this growth? Like it was like word of mouth, or were you, because you were not spending to acquire readers? So
We
this
were
was all
spending.
like.
So
Okay.
just to be clear, it's not that we were not spending money on marketing. It's just that there was no one whose job it was to market or to acquire users. It was more like Pratilipi's culture has been that anybody can come and do anything. So like a PM, for example, could be running an experiment on Facebook. An engineer could be running an experiment on Google. A customer service slash language guy might be running offline meetup. And all of these will kind of require money to spend, and all of these will end up acquiring users. It's just that it was not about acquiring users. It was more about like experimenting and seeing what works, what doesn't work.
Okay. And but like, tell me some of the ways in which that 4x growth was happening. Like, what were the
Just
things that were?
honestly, people look for silver bullets. There was no silver bullet. It was more like people have tried, let's say, 500 experiments. Out of 500, 6 of them have worked, and that's how users came. Another 494 did not work, and that's fine.
But what worked for you? I'm trying to derive those lessons,
Sure.
bullet points.
That is the wrong way to look at it, in my opinion, because again, for different companies and different use cases, different experiments would work. As in, even for Pratilipi, if I do the exact same 500 experiments again, and again, just to be clear, obviously we are doing 500 new experiments, but the same 6 will probably not work. Like that was in a different era with a different kind of product, different kind of market dynamics, and so on and so forth. The single biggest one that worked really well for us was SEO, and that has continued to work really, really well. Then the second one that worked really well was basically people sharing stories on Facebook more than any other platform. So sometimes it would be writers sharing their stories that, I have published the story and come and read that. Sometimes it would be readers sharing a story that I just read Mary Avantika and this is a great novel and you should definitely go and read that. So that was second. Performance ads on Facebook worked really well. So that was the third. Like these would be the top 3 in that order.
Okay. A performance for readers or for authors?
For readers. For writers, I don't think we have ever spent money on acquisition.
Okay. Okay. So some of the readers will also be writers. So when they
That
land on the
is,
platform, then they
yep.
get converted into writers.
So, yep. So the best thing is, at least in Pratilipi's context, I think that over a period of time, we have figured that like readers automatically become writers over a period of time. Like everybody has a story in their head, and if you make the product simple enough and intuitive enough, over a period of time, they will start like creating content as well and not just consuming content.
How did you make it simple and intuitive for a person to be a content creator?
So I am not really a product guy. I just
Huh,
gave a lot of freedom and flexibility to my product managers who did a
huh,
good job, I think.
huh. Okay. But as in, is it something unique and different from, say, the platforms like, say, Medium or Quora, which I am more exposed to? Is Pratilipi
There
different
is
from them?
no fundamental difference. It would
Hmm,
just be that for like this particular target segment, for example, what works may not necessarily work for Medium's target segment, for example. Or like maybe the personalization might be a little bit better in terms of like okay, what kind of users or like what kind of language, what kind of interface do you provide versus like everybody gets the same interface. So there would be nuances, but fundamentally, I don't think there would be any like large difference fundamentally speaking.
Okay. So when someone lands into Pratilipi, they only see content in their preferred language, like
Of
that.
course, yeah.
Okay.
Not just preferred language, but like our best guess on what is the kind of content that you are likely to like.
Okay. Okay. And are people composing stories on mobile or on laptop? Like on what kind of?
Mobile is the largest by a big margin. I think 92% is mobile. Actually, 92% is mobile app alone,
Hmm.
and then the
So,
remaining 6-7% would be desktop plus everything else.
which sounds fairly unique. I think.
Not
Uh,
really. So this has been true for like Wattpad. This is true for China Literature. This is true for most of the platforms which are UGC platforms,
hmm. But these
except
are
for
like
Northern America to
what?
some extent and Europe to
Hmm,
some extent. Mobile is
hmm.
the like device of choice for people in general in the rest of the world.
But this is how long? Like average length of content? Like
This has
are these
nothing.
like?
So I'm not sure if you know. So this has nothing to do with length of content. Like 50 Shades of
Hmm.
Grey as a trilogy, the entire trilogy was written on a BlackBerry. So
Wow.
for us, for example, like there's a story called Mary Avantika on Pratilipi, which used to be the most read story. I don't know if it still is. That takes
Hmm.
19 hours to read.
Wow.
All of these are published on mobile.
Wow. Okay. Amazing. And you had tools so that people could save drafts and then come back and edit
Correct.
and
Of course.
review
Of course. Of course.
and people typically release it in serialized, like this
Uh,
Avantika story. Was it serialized or like
that
one
one
shot?
wasn't. At that
Uh,
time, we did not have, when Mary Avantika was published, I think maybe 5 years back. Uh,
okay.
at that time, there was no serialization support on Pratilipi. But today,
Hmm.
if you look at content, like 70-80% of the content is serialized literature.
Okay. Okay. And what has been your monetization journey? Like, when did you start monetizing? What were the ways in which you tried to monetize?
Mhm. So we just started monetization about 5 months back, maybe. Actually, different products would be different, to be fair. So for comics, for example, we started monetization about 8-9 months back, I think. For literature product, we started monetizing about 4-5 months back. For IVM, they have always been monetizing, but we started doubling down about 4 months back. Uh, FM still doesn't monetize. So for different products, it would be different. So the way we think about Pratilipi is that think of each vertical as an entirely independent, separate company. So each product would have its own independent team, its own independent cost structure, its own independent revenue model, and so on and so forth. So for the literature product, for example, there are four different parts of monetization. One part is essentially IP licensing, which is basically that there's a story that's great, so we acquire the IP and then we kind of convert that into different formats and we make money via that. Second is basically subscription. So there are two types of subscription. One is called Pratilipi Premium, which is a platform-wide subscription. One is like Super Fan, which is basically you're subscribing to a particular creator. And the third is basically that you can, if you like something but you don't want to subscribe because you're not sure if it is that good, then you can send creators virtual gifts in the form of like small stickers that have some monetary value. So that is the third layer of monetization. And this is how like literature monetizes.
Why would
comics,
someone subscribe to Pratilipi? Isn't it free to read, or
it
are there
is.
restrictions?
And it will, as in most of the 99% content will always be free. So there are different ways to think about it. So I can tell you what it is right now, but obviously over a period of time it will evolve. So like a year out, it might be slightly different. So for Pratilipi super fan, which is basically you are subscribing to a creator. In that case, you get access to some exclusive features. Like for example, there's a chat room which is subscribers only. So there's a writer, let's say Avita Sharma. So if you are her subscriber, only then you can participate in the chat room. Similarly, there could be other features. That is one. The second is that writers can put one or two of their series under this subscription program, where the subscribers will get access to that content 5 days before everybody else gets access to that content. So that is for super fans. For Pratilipi Premium, basically you get access to all of these content related benefits, but you don't, and for all writers, but you don't get the benefits of features. So you still can't participate in the chat room. But
What I understand, the content benefit is only about getting access early. If you were not a subscriber, you would still have access, but if you're a
yes,
subscriber, then you'll get early access.
as of
Okay.
today, yes. And again, just to be clear, it can change, it will change over a period of time, but
Right,
99%
right.
content will always be free,
Okay.
maybe even more than 99%.
Okay. And okay, got it. So you've never done ads? Like ads has not been a source of revenue for you?
For literature, no. As in, there might have been experiments, but not as a. And we will probably launch ads in 2 years or something. But that is not because we think of it as a source of revenue for us. That's more like there would be creators. So, like the top tier creators will make money from IP. The layer below that will make money from subscription. The layer below that will make money from micropayments and virtual gifts. But we want to have a like some way of monetization for the layer below that as well. And ads would be that layer. But that's just at least a year and a half, 2 years out. And it is unlikely that it will be a big part of Pratilipi's revenue.
Why not? All UGC platforms run on ads. No? That's fairly counterintuitive. Like YouTube, your biggest inspiration is like purely, or now they have a subscription focus, but it used to be purely ad driven.
That is true. I think it's just that ads, if you have too many ads, for example, then they spoil the reading slash viewing slash listening experience. So that's one reason. The second reason is that like today we are living in a world where there are more ways for people to be able to transact online. So I think when YouTube started, for example, back then the ways to transact online were very, very small. In India, even 3 years back, even if you really wanted to pay online, except for the top 20, 30 million people, there was no way for you. That has started to change, which means that over a period of time, more and more people will have access to tools like UPI, for example, to be able to pay if they want to. So, like, I think direct payment just makes more sense from that perspective. And also, ads only work when you have like upwards of a couple of 100 million users. Ads don't work really well for companies which have like 5, 10, 20, 30, 40 million users.
Okay. And what has been your like? Tell me about this similar approach for the podcast, and like what is the strategy in podcast monetization, in comics monetization? What are like the
So for comics, it's fairly simple. It's basically pay for early access or just wait and read it for free. So comics are released on a weekly schedule. So each comics will have a chapter coming every week. And if you want to read today's release today, then you have to pay a small amount of money to read that, or you wait for a week and you can read it for free. That is that.
And these comics are also like UGC content.
As of today, no. So it will be UGC at some point. The thing is that there isn't enough great quality content in comics for Indian languages as of today. So we have to basically invest into creating that content. But like 5 years out, it should be almost entirely UGC. But
so
like,
you are like you're onboarding authors, or are you going to publishers, or like how are you?
So we have done both. So we have licensed comics from, for example, Diamond Comics, which published Chacha Chaudhary, Pinky, Billu. We have licensed comics from Graphic India. We have licensed comics from Amar Chitrakatha. We have licensed comics from global players like Tapas. So we have licensed comics from like larger publishers. We also work with a lot of freelancers and a lot of studios to convert our stories into comics, where we are basically financing for that. So that is the second layer.
Okay. And do you also translate? Like, say, maybe a comic was in Hindi originally. Like,
okay. That depends on what licenses we have. But we will. As in, for our own comics, we definitely do. For licensed comics, we do depending on how popular the comics is and what kind of license the publisher is willing to give us.
Okay. And for podcasts, what is the monetization?
So for IVM, as of today, monetization is almost entirely brand ads. Mainly because IVM, unlike Pratilipi and Pratilipi Literature, is a very high-end premium product, which means that a lot of brands basically want to associate with IVM's podcast. So almost entirety of revenue as of today would be branded podcasts or like essentially brand ads. But we will be launching subscription on top of IVM podcast by mid of next year.
Okay, so that you can listen to them ad free, like for an ad free
No,
experience. Like,
it's not about ads. It's more like, so for example, subscription will not be for all podcasts, and subscription will not be to IBM. Subscription will be to specific podcasts. So think of, for example, let's say Paisa Vaisa, or think of, let's say, Cyrus Says. So there are some people who really, really, really like Cyrus. In that case, basically, you can listen to the main podcast for free. But if you want to have behind the scenes access, if you want to be able to ask a question to Cyrus, or like if you want to be part of a lucky draw where you might become a guest next time and things like that, then you have to subscribe to Cyrus.
Okay, like a super fan
Exactly.
subscription.
The main podcast is still free, but there are certain exclusive things which are only available for subscribers. So if, let's say, 800,000 people listen to Cyrus, maybe only about 5,000 actually become subscribers. It's just that once those 5,000 subscribers kind of start growing across different podcasts, then it starts becoming a large enough business.
Okay. So originally, when you started in 2015, it must have been bootstrapped, right? Like to fund the. So when did the first round of funding happen?
So we raised, like, the exact first was 30 lakhs from Times Internet in March 2015. And then the first institutional round was $1 million led by Nexus.
30 lakhs was like a angel round kind of a.
It was more of an accelerator round. So T-Labs, so Times Internet used to, like, BCCL has something called Times Internet, which is their digital arm. And then Times Internet used to run an accelerator called T-Labs. So that was a round led by T-Labs.
So, and it made sense for them because you are in the content space, they are in the content space.
I don't think that's how it works. So T-Labs Times wanted to become a proper, like, financial investor, as in not just a strategic investor. So they have been investing in companies across formats, like across use cases, even if that has nothing to do with content or whatever. So it was a purely financial investment.
Okay. And so this was like an incubator round. Then when was the next round?
Then we raised $1 million led by Nexus Venture Partners in February 2016.
What kind of pitch did you have at that time for Nexus, and what kind of user numbers and all did you have?
I can guess. I think I would have had about maybe a couple of 100,000 monthly active users, like 200, 300, 400,000 monthly active users. I don't remember exactly. The pitch was basically what we are talking about right now. Like, we want to build a storytelling platform across different formats, across different languages, across different geographies. But we are going to be focusing on literature for the first 2, 3, 4 years. And if we are able to win that, then we'll start expanding into the other formats and other geographies from there. So that was a simple pitch. In fact, in my seed round, I actually even had a slides saying that why you should not invest in Pratilipi.
Okay, what was that like?
I don't remember all of it, but I think it was basically like, if you're thinking of a company that will become profitable very quickly, Pratilipi is not that company. If you're thinking of a company where we'll focus on how sexy the product looks, Pratilipi is not that company. We are going to be focusing on our users and what really works from experiments, and not in terms of like what looks sexy or what looks flashy. Bunch of other things. I don't really remember all of this.
Okay. Then when did you raise the next round after this 1 million?
I think we raised a 4.3 million Series A, I think in about February, March 2018, roughly. This was led by Omedia Network.
Okay. So by this time, nobody was telling you to run ads. Like, that is still something which surprises me, that lack of focus on ads. Like, it's fairly different
So a lot of people come up with their own different advices. People have said that launch ads. People have said that launch subscription. People have said that launch microtransactions. People have said a bunch of different things. But at the end of the day,
Omedia did not ask you to run ads or like put any pressure on you to monetize.
I think we have been fairly lucky in terms of our investors. I don't think anybody has ever really pressured us that you should be monetizing right now, or like you should be generating revenue right now, or things like that. As in, would they have given different kinds of advice? They would have. As in, I'm sure that everyone would have said at some point, why don't you launch subscription? everyone would have said at some point, why don't you launch ads? But that would have been more like a discussion as against like, okay, that this is what you have to do. I think that ways we have been fairly lucky.
Okay. Got it. Okay. So, and then after this, the 2018 round with Omidyar?
Then we raised a 15 million Series B. I think it would have been maybe sometime in 2019, mid of 2019, I think. This was led by Shiming Venture Partners. This is a Chinese VC fund. They have done a lot of UGC platform investments in China, basically. So this was our Series B.
And what were the user numbers by that time when Shiming?
Again, I would have to guess. I think we would have been about 5-6 million monthly active users. Might have been about 10, somewhere around. I think something between 5 and 10 probably is a good guess.
And pre-pandemic, like 2020, early 2020, what were the numbers like?
Should have been about, I think, 15 million monthly active users. 15,
And
17, something like that.
And today, what are they?
For the literature, now today we have multiple products, of course. Literature has about 31, 32 million monthly active users.
So you doubled in like during the pandemic. Wow.
Yep.
Okay. And the other products, like what?
So comics is about, I think comics should touch 1 million next month. Today it should be about 900, 950 KMAU. Audio, like Pratilipi FM, should be about 400,000 monthly active users, 350 to 400. IVM MAU is impossible to guess because IVM distributes across different platforms and Spotify gives out different numbers and so on and so forth. That's hard to kind of say. So total maybe about 33 million MAU, 34 million MAU right now.
Okay. Amazing. And you also raised like a pretty massive round recently, no?
So we closed our Series D, a 48 million round a couple of months back.
And what was like, this is like a pretty big round. So what was it that excited the investors and, what did they see?
I think obviously Crafton guys would be able to answer this better, but my guess is that they have seen the value of great storytelling across different formats in Korea, which is their home market. And what excited them was that like we can probably do the same, but for a much larger market. And we, as an our strategy, even from when we started, at least in the sense of like what we have been saying. So obviously early on we were not really doing it because we were focused on online literature. But even from that time, our strategy has been very clear that the same story will be utilized across different formats. And this is something that like large players like a Naver and a Kakao are getting towards now. So I think they were just excited by the possibility of a company which has been built ground up with that particular thesis in mind, that you will have multiple storytelling products across different geographies, across different formats, and then you utilize the best stories across different formats and geographies again. So I think it was just a belief in like that thesis of what we have been trying to do. That should have been the single biggest reason.
Okay. And what will you use these funds for?
So mostly, I think there are 3 areas where they would be used. One is in terms of strengthening your team. One is in terms of like customer acquisition, content acquisition, IP acquisition, and the third is basically if we opportunistically get any opportunity to, let's say, acquire a different company, or if we in fact, we will start expanding into global markets. So basically, like, expanding into newer areas either via acquisition or via like expansion into a new country. So these would be the 3 big areas.
When you expand, will you be targeting the Indian diaspora in other countries, or will you also, like, for example, create content in, let's say, the language of Sri Lanka or
We are
say
very
Nepali?
clear that so we are very clear that Pratilipi is going to be a global company if we succeed. So it's entirely possible that we fail, and which is fine. But if we succeed, we are going to be a global company. So strategy might differ. It's entirely possible that, for example, if we go to US, let's say we start by focusing on Indian diaspora first because it would be relatively easier to start with that. But over a period of time, like we will have content for everyone, or at least we'll try to have content for everyone.
Okay. Got it. So, what is your role as CEO? Like, there are some CEOs who are strong in customer acquisition or growth or marketing, or there are some CEOs who are product first. What kind of a CEO are you?
So mostly, as in I don't know honestly, but mostly I focus on just getting the best people to work at Pratilipi, either as colleagues or as investors or as partners. And I think that is my number one focus. Number two focus is like when people are working with Pratilipi, how do I kind of build the best culture for them? And I focus a lot on how do I make sure that my team is not just happy but also being pushed to grow at a like fast pace, to learn at a fast pace. So we put a lot of emphasis on that even if you leave Pratilipi, you are as successful as possible. Like you actually played a good part in your uh, career journey, both within Pratilipi but also outside Pratilipi. So that's second. Sorry, you were saying?
How do you do this? Like, how do you push people to grow, and how do you ensure that your team is growing?
So a lot of things, right? Like, so number one is, for example, we give people insane amount of independence and we have insane amount of transparency. So like a lot of companies, for example, the marketing team doesn't have retention data. Uh, like product team doesn't have access to your analytics platform. In Pratilipi's case, even if you're an intern who has joined today in, let's say, graphic design, you'll still have access to literally every single analytics that we have. You can see everything from DAU, MAU, retention, whatever. You can go and talk to anyone from any vertical in terms of what they are doing, what their strategies are, and so on and so forth. Similarly, on independence, we don't have independence, we have an insane level of independence. Like you get to pick what you want to work on. There is no OKRs, there is no goals, there is no targets. There's like we don't come and tell you, for example, that okay, you have to acquire 5,000 users this month. We tell you like, okay, what is it that you want to achieve? Uh, that's second. Third is just in terms of providing resources to people who want to do something. And the resources could be whatever. Resources sometimes could be, for example, you want to run experiments, so you need whatever, let's say $100,000 to run ads on Facebook, and you have zero experience in marketing. We are fine with that. It could be something else. Like could be, for example, you want to do a particular course. Let's say you want to do a remote MTech. Company will sponsor that. You want to have a particular executive coach or mentor. Company will sponsor that. Or whatever else. Like you want to run your own startup, we will try to support that in whatever way we can. In fact, there have already been two startups that is now public knowledge, both of which were born from hackathons at Pratilipi's internal hackathons. And in both cases, like these are like the founders are all ex-Pratilipi, but also like their early investors are mostly ex-Pratilipi, as in they worked on the ideas while they were at Pratilipi, and like that's generally just how we operate. And it's again, it's not that these are two exceptions. That is just how Pratilipi has always operated.
Hmm. But how do you control it? Like it just sounds chaotic. Anybody can come and ask for $100,000 to run Facebook ads. How do you? I mean,
We
there
don't.
must be some
So every
gatekeeping, some mechanism of approval.
So every strategy and every culture, it's less about being good and bad. It's more about trade-offs. Like what kind of trade-offs are you willing to make if you want to go on a particular strategy? So we make the trade-off that we are going to bet on people, and we are going to bet on long term, which would mean that in short term there would be chaos. Which would mean that in short term some people will take advantage of us. In short term, it means that there would be some inefficiencies. It's just that that's a trade-off that we are willing to live with.
Hmm. But
And we believe
there is
that is
no approval mechanism at all. Like
depends on the kind of things, right? So so for example, if you have zero experience in marketing and you want to run marketing campaigns, uh, as in now, for example, there would typically be a marketing guy who would kind of keep a lookout. Okay, are you not making a very obvious mistake? When there was no marketing guy, for example, I will take a lookout. Okay, are you not making an obvious mistake? Similarly, for example, let's say okay, you want to go and pursue your MTech. Your reporting manager has to basically come and say, okay, have you done enough within Pratilipi where we understand that MTech is actually going to be good for you? And again, it's not necessarily about whether it's good for company, but like if, for example, you have been essentially slacking off for the last 4 months here, it's chances are that you are going to be slacking on of MTech as well. So we are probably just going to let you go, forget about having MTech or not. So for different contexts, there might be somebody who is helping figure out if this is the right thing to do. But in general, there are no gatekeepers type for majority of things.
Okay. Okay.
So, for
Sorry, you
example,
were
let's say
telling me.
you want to build your own startup. I will typically talk a lot with you to try and figure out if it is a feasible idea. Like, does that make sense? You don't have to take my advice, but I'll still kind of talk about it quite a bit. If it sounds feasible, we will not only just let you go, we'll actually help in whatever way we can. But if it doesn't sound feasible, we will try to tell you that, you know what, this idea sounds bad and it's probably not going to work because of XYZ reasons.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. You were telling me the list of things you're doing. So one is attracting people. Second is empowering and growing people.
Right.
What else?
Third is basically is general firefighting. So, for example, when we did not have a marketing team, I was as in making sure that everybody who's doing marketing experiments, they're not making very big obvious mistakes. Similarly, when we did not have a legal counsel, I was the in-house lawyer. And we did not have a finance guy, I was the in-house CA, CS, whatever you want to call it. Now in different verticals, whatever needs to be done. So for example, right now my marketing head is trying out a different idea as a part of Pratilipi, but like a different vertical. So right now I have started stepping in a little bit into marketing. So basically whatever needs to be done at that particular point in time. And that will change basis day to day, week to week. So that is probably third. And the fourth one is just being a sounding board for people if they are not clear whether it's aligned with the strategy, overall company strategy, whether like they have 5 ideas but they are not sure which one to prioritize. So basically, just discussing with people and figuring out like why X makes more sense versus why Y makes more sense. So I think these would probably be the 4 parts of what I'm focused on.
What is your process for deciding who gets to join Pratilipi?
So again, just to be clear, Pratilipi is very highly independent. So it might not be my call for 99% people. So I only get to make the call if you're reporting to me. Whoever you are reporting to, they get to make the final call on whether they should join or not. It doesn't matter what Ranjeet says. If you are going to be reporting to me and I am the hiring manager, then generally I'm looking for people who I believe are going to grow exponentially over the next 3, 4, 5, 10 years. So more than anything else, I'm looking for proxies or looking for leading signals so that I can see that whether or not you are going to learn and grow at a very, very fast pace at Pratilipi. I care much less about your previous pedigree, your previous experience, or anything else. I like people who are like really resourceful because Pratilipi is still early stage startup and there's a lot of chaos. So people who are resourceful are likely to do better. People who are okay living in a chaotic environment where like nobody's hand holding you and telling you, okay, this is what you should do. So you can take ownership on your own. I like people who have high problem solving ability because generally because of that lack of hand holding, people who are good at problem solving are the people who would enjoy working. Otherwise, you'll just get stuck very, very quickly. And then depends on the role, there would be specific other attributes that I would be looking at. But these would be the broad attributes.
So, how do you judge these things? So, you're saying you want someone who's going to grow exponentially, but how do you judge that? How do you decide he will grow, he will not grow?
It's a judgment call, right? So, like, I would be wrong very often, obviously. But basically, it's two things. One is that what have you done in the past? Like, have you learned and grown quickly, or have you basically did you get lucky to be born in the right place at the right time in the right family and so on and so forth, and then you just kind of cruise along. So somebody who has kind of learned and grown quickly in the past are likely to learn and grow quickly in the future as well.
And what kind of what is your interview like? So you just chat with them and ask them, what did you do in the past?
80% of the interview would basically be about what you have done in the past, what you want to do in the future. 20% of time it could be depending on person to person. It could be like, let's say, a puzzle. It could be, for example, a hypothetical scenario that what would you do in something like this. It could be more of engineering question. So that depends on which area I want to dig deeper into. But 80% of the interview is almost always just chatting about what you have done in the past and what you want to do.
Okay. Sorry, I interrupted you. You were saying 2 ways in which you judge. One is that
one is what you have done in the past. That's one. And the second is something like a case study where I'll keep on giving you new information. I'll try to see how you are utilizing that new information into your model. So if you're not utilizing that new information into evolving your thinking, chances are that you will not do it in real life either. But if you are doing it like while we are having the discussion, if you suddenly get to know a new point and now your thinking has changed, chances are that will happen in real life as well.
How do you do this? Like, can you show me an example? Like,
could be a lot of different. Let me give you an easier example. Let's assume that you are a big fan of a particular politician, and that's fine. And then I give you a new piece of information that that particular politician has actually bribed someone. Does that filter into your process, or like you don't? I'm not saying you suddenly start hating him. I'm saying like, do you keep that point of information? You evolve your thinking. Now I give you a different point. Let's say that that politician actually has raped someone in the past. Does that change your thought process? If I give you a new piece of information, that politician actually came from a really bad background and then they have donated almost all of their net worth to charity. Does that change your process? So, like, this is a weird example. I'll typically not be about politicians.
I understand.
But the point is basically like there is a viewpoint that you hold basis something, and I keep on giving you new information. I keep on seeing how that new information changes and evolves your thought process.
Okay. And are you like a information junkie? Like, do you love to know
yes and, no.
and learn and, news, current affairs and...
Mostly no, a little bit yes. So I read a lot. But the purpose of reading for me is not learning. The purpose of reading for me is, well, reading is fun. If like it obviously, because I read so much, so it obviously happens that I know a bunch of things, but that is never the purpose. The purpose is just to have fun, and that means that inadvertently you end up learning a bunch of stuff, and knowing a bunch of things, but that's not why I read. That's not so. I like, for example, playing intellectual ping pong with people where we are talking about random hypothetical scenarios, why this company might work, this might not work, why this strategy is better, that strategy is better. The purpose is not to dissect the strategy. The purpose is to have fun. It just so happens that because you are doing that, so you learn a little bit more about strategy as
And you typically read fiction or non-fiction?
well. Both.
And like what language?
Now mostly English, because over last 7, 8, 10 years I got used to it. So now maybe 80% English, 20% Hindi.
Is there a difference in quality of content available in English versus vernacular?
For literature, not anymore. I don't think so. Maybe there is still some, but it would be like 1920, not like 1525. For non-fiction, I think there is still a huge gap. But again, it's not a function of talent; it's a function of opportunity. It just so happened that there was not that many non-fiction platforms for non-English writers or non-English creators, which meant that the best people either learned English or they stopped creating. Build something like Pratilipi for non-fiction creators, and the quality will rise automatically.
So are you planning to do that? To go into
Of course,
non-fiction?
of course. Like for IVM, for example, is almost entirely non-fiction, right?
Right.
And like we would be doing a lot of stuff about non-fiction as well. I don't know how it would look like. Would it be a part of our existing product? Would it be a new product? I don't know. But will we do something? Of course, 100%.
So these are all separate apps. Like Pratilipi.fm is a different app, and the comic app
These are
is
separate
different.
products, yes.
Okay. And the FM app is currently like you are paying for the content, or is it UGC?
There's some UGC. There's some licensed content, but a lot of content basically we are, it's content that we have already acquired, but we are paying for production and editing and sound engineering and all of that.
And because you have a studio in the form of IVM, so
No,
that
IVM's
process.
quality is very, very different. Like that is not the kind of investment that we would make for something where we are primarily doing, for Pratilipi FM and Pratilipi Comics are going to be UGC platforms at some point in time. It's just that right now we are investing because, well, number one, we can afford to. Number two, the market is not ready, which means that either we have to wait for 2, 3, 4 years for market to get ready, or we have to invest to get it faster to that point. IVM has a certain reputation where the content that they create has to have a certain level of quality. So IVM's production cost would be 3x, 4x of Pratilipi FM's production cost.
Right. Got it. Okay. So you are essentially in the space of the creator economy, so to say. Like you are essentially looking to arm the creators. So what is the lay of the land here? What is the other players in this space whom you see as possible future competitors or today's competitors?
I think I don't really think of them as competitors, mainly because the market as of today is still fairly small, including Pratilipi. I'm not talking. I'm not trying to belittle the competition. Like the number of players in a creator economy as a whole is still fairly small. None of these, including
Who are
us,
the players in the creator economy? Just for our
depends on
listeners,
how you
if you can.
define creator economy, obviously. But I think the largest and the most important one is YouTube and Instagram by a big, big, big margin. But outside of YouTube and Instagram, depending on the format, there's, for example, for video, there is TVF, there is Array, there is what do you call that? Pocket Aces. There are a bunch of others. For audio, there is Pocket FM, there is Cuckoo FM, there is Headphone, there are a bunch of others. For literature, there is Matrubharati, there is Kahaniya, there is Valmiki, there is Story Mirror, there are a bunch of others. For other formats, like for creator merchandising, there are a bunch of others. For creator monetization, there is Scroll Stack. There should be a bunch of others again. So depending on the context that you're talking about or the use case that you're talking about, in each use case, I think there would be at least 5, 7 people trying to do something or other.
Okay. Are you also planning to build like a Substack kind of a product for email newsletters, or do you think that your audience is not relevant?
Actually, it's not about Substack like per se. Substack it's not about Substack or Pratilipi. Both of us are doing the same thing. It's just that they are starting from a different point. We are starting from a different point, right? So at the end of the day, what creators want is like audience, engagement, and monetization. So we started by saying, okay, let me solve for audience, then I solve for engagement, then I solve for monetization. What Substack did was they said, okay, let me solve for monetization, then I'll solve for engagement, then I'll solve for distribution. So it's less, as an over a period of time, you will see Substack resembling more and more like Pratilipi and Pratilipi resembling more and more like Substack. It's just that we are going towards the same point in different directions. I think it's unlikely that we'll launch a product like Substack, given that we already have distribution. Like, why would I take a step back? Is it possible? It's possible, but it's unlikely.
Hmm. 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 Okay. Okay. Got it. And is video on the horizon? Like that's the last frontier for you, so to say.
Not in the short term, probably. So we are not. So we are only interested in storytelling products. So we are not interested in very short form content, for example. Now, long form video, we'll have to compete against YouTube. That's not a battle that we think we can win. So probably not in the short term. Within video we are doing bunch of stuff. So for example, we are producing web series, but then we are not distributing them like Netflix or Hotstar or MX Player are distributing them. We have started experimenting, and we want to really double down on motion comics. If you haven't seen, you should go to YouTube and check out Murdongi Train, that we have published the first season. I think we just finished 3 days back as a motion comic series on YouTube. It has had tremendous
Train,
response.
you said? MODOMI.
Sorry? Murdoki Train.
Murdoki Train.
Oh, yeah. In English, it would be called Train of the Dead.
Okay.
So for motion comics, for example, maybe we might actually launch our own distribution product. But video as a whole, distribution, I think we don't want to compete against YouTube.
I'm really fascinated with how you hold the ship together with such a laissez-faire management style. How big is your team now?
I think about 160 people, roughly.
And do you think this laissez-faire style can continue when you are, say, 500 people?
I have no clue. I don't know. I think when we were 20, I thought that maybe at 50 it will start breaking down. When we got to 50, we thought at 100 it will start breaking down. So we don't. Honest answer is
why hasn't it broken down so far? What makes this work? What makes it work? I've never heard of any other company which has such a laissez-faire kind of a culture and organization approach towards.
Right. I think it's mostly that early on it was still me driving these values or this kind of company culture, right? Over a period of time, there are more and more leaders within Pratilipi that kind of also percolate the same thing. So when it was just me and I was managing this for 5 people, it was easy. But at 25, it would have been hard. But now, let's say when we are at 170, it's not one person driving that culture. It's more like 20, 25 people who have worked in Pratilipi for long enough, who genuinely believe in this way of working. And they have been basically the beacon of light for how we want to proceed. So that makes things a lot easier. I think if it was just me driving this, that would have broken like 4 years back, 5 years back.
But don't you worry about like people making wrong hires or I know that at 160 size also a lot of founders would still personally interview every person getting hired just to ensure culture fitment and but in your case you've left it to the respective leaders to decide.
I worry a lot, but that is a trade-off that you have to make. I think a bigger problem would be if we are doing a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and both of either of the two can work. Where founders are interviewing everyone or at least every major candidate, and like a very high independence culture like Pratilipi, either can work. I think the problem is when people don't know which culture they want to build and they try to do a little bit of this and a little bit of that.
Okay. So you come across as someone with a lot of belief in ideological purity. Like there is a certain ideology which you want to stay pure towards and you don't want to dilute it.
So that is true. So I am idealistic, but I'm also very practical. So in the sense that, for example, I would never say that Pratilipi's culture is going to be like this forever because I don't know. And maybe at certain size it becomes impossible and we have to change this or change that. So culture is evolving just like values are evolving. It's not that nothing about Pratilipi's culture has changed. It's just that the core has remained same. But on the edges, a lot of things have changed and evolved over a period of time. The same is true about our strategy. Like the core of the strategy has remained same since even before I got my co-founders. But on the edges, of course, a lot of things have different things have changed.
So that is also part of your ideology. I don't know is one of your ideologies.
Which is fair. I think I'm generally fairly consistent.
But this is, I mean, I've seen founders with decades of experience who don't have this kind of ideological purity. What made it happen?
Honestly, I don't know. I think I became just as in back in 2011 or so. I decided that like I want to be conscious about what kind of person I want to be, and I think like because I decided to be conscious about what kind of person I want to be over a period of time, I also became conscious about what kind of company I want to keep, what kind of company I want to build, what kind of culture I want to have, and so on and so forth. I think I just have been a little bit more conscious about what is okay with me and what is not, because I, as in again, like 10 years back, I decided to keep what kind of person I want to be. So like everything else kind of started from there. I think. So it's
What
a
made
lot of
that?
these
What
things
was
are
the trigger for you to think about this? Like, what kind of person do I want
honest
to be?
answer that I don't remember.
Okay.
Must have been a fight or something with someone where I felt like I was being an asshole, and I thought, okay, like I don't want to be an asshole. So I thought, okay, instead of like me being random qualities, let me kind of consciously decide what kind of qualities I want to have and what kind of qualities I want to unlearn.
This episode of Founder Thesis podcast is brought to you by Long Haul Ventures. Long Haul Ventures is the long haul partner for founders and startups that are building for the long haul. More about them is at www.longhaulventures.com.